There is a book in the Bible that reads less like a theological treatise and more like a letter written by a father who has lived long enough to see everything. The full arc of human joy and heartbreak, the rise and fall of reputations, the long-term consequences of good decisions and terrible ones, the way wisdom compounds across a lifetime while foolishness quietly destroys. It is a book that does not lecture you from a distance. It pulls up a chair, looks you in the eye, and speaks directly into the reality of your actual life. That book is Proverbs. And in a world that feels more uncertain than it has in a long time, where the news cycle shifts not daily but hourly, where relationships fracture under pressures that previous generations never faced, where economic anxiety, moral confusion, spiritual disorientation, and a deep, pervasive sense that the ground beneath us is less stable than we thought have become the defining emotional experiences of our age. Proverbs does not offer platitudes. It does not offer easy answers or quick fixes or three-step formulas for a comfortable life. What it offers is something immeasurably more valuable than any of those things: wisdom. Not the kind of wisdom that sounds polished at a conference or looks elegant on a motivational poster, but the kind of wisdom that was forged in real life, tested across real generations of real people, applied in real crises and real heartbreaks and real moments of decision, and found again and again to be unshakable. Proverbs was written primarily by Solomon, a man who was given one of the most remarkable opportunities in all of human history. When God appeared to him and invited him to ask for anything at all, Solomon did not ask for wealth. He did not ask for power or long life or the destruction of his enemies. He asked for wisdom, the capacity to understand, to discern, to navigate the complexity of leading people and building a life in ways that genuinely honored God and genuinely served others. And God gave it to him. Along with everything else, he gave him wisdom in such abundance that people came from the ends of the earth to hear what Solomon had to say. The result of that gift, applied, tested, refined, and collected across the full breadth of human experience, is the Book of Proverbs. A collection of sayings, reflections, warnings, and teachings that have guided kings and merchants, fathers and mothers, farmers and scholars, the powerful and the powerless, across thousands of years and across every conceivable culture and context. Today, in the 21st century, in a world that Solomon could never have imagined, these truths are not merely still relevant. In many ways, they are more urgently needed now than they have ever been. In this video, we are going to walk through 52 lessons from the Book of Proverbs, one for every week of the year, that have the genuine power to transform the way you think, the way you speak, the way you lead, the way you love, the way you handle money, the way you raise children, the way you respond to conflict, and ultimately the way you build your entire life. These are not quick hacks. These are not life tips you can skim and move on from. These are deep, enduring, tested truths that, when taken seriously and applied consistently over time, will build in you a kind of wisdom that the chaos and uncertainty of this world simply cannot shake. Before we dive into the first lesson, I want to pause and say something from the heart. If this content speaks to you, if it meets you where you are, if it addresses something real in your life, would you consider subscribing to this channel? Not just as a casual click, but as a genuine commitment to keep growing, keep learning, keep returning to the wisdom that God has placed within reach for every single one of us. This channel exists because of people exactly like you, people from every corner of the world who are hungry for something real and lasting, something that holds up under pressure, something that actually changes how they live. I would love for you to be a real, ongoing part of this community, and if you want to go even deeper, consider becoming a channel member. Members get early access to videos before they are released publicly, and they become part of an even closer community of people who are on this same journey together. It is a way of saying, I am not just here for a single video, I am committed to the long walk of wisdom. Wherever you are watching from right now, whether you are in the United States or the United Kingdom, in Nigeria or Australia, in the Philippines, Brazil, India, Canada, South Africa, New Zealand, Kenya, or anywhere else in the world, I want you to drop your location in the comments below. Every single time I sit down and read through those comments, I'm genuinely moved by the reach of this community, by the diversity of backgrounds and stories and life situations represented by the people who gather here around a common hunger for wisdom. You are not alone in this, not even slightly. Now, with that said, let us begin. Lesson 1. The fear of the Lord is where everything starts. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. Proverbs 9-10. Before we can honestly receive a single lesson from Proverbs, we have to understand what the entire book is built upon. And it is this: wisdom does not begin with intelligence. It does not begin with a good education, with extensive experience, with access to the right networks, or even with genuinely good intentions. Wisdom begins with the fear of the Lord. The word fear here is critically important to understand correctly because it is easy to misread. In contemporary usage, fear almost always carries the connotation of threat, of cowering before something dangerous and unpredictable. But the Hebrew word used here is yira, and it carries a far richer and more textured meaning. It describes a posture of deep, genuine reverence, of awe that produces alignment, of the kind of humble, honest recognition that God is God and you are not, that there is a moral order to the universe, that truth is not merely a matter of personal preference, that there is one who holds all things together, who sees all things clearly, and whose word about reality is more reliable than your best guess. In the culture that has spent decades telling you to trust your gut, follow your heart, define your own truth, and answer to no one, this lesson is countercultural in the most radical possible way. Proverbs is saying something deeply unfashionable. Before you can think clearly about anything, money, relationships, leadership, conflict, purpose, identity, you must first orient yourself correctly toward God. Everything else in the book flows from this single foundational reality. The person who fears the Lord is not paralyzed by anxiety or crushed by religious obligation. They are liberated by alignment. When you know who holds the universe together, you do not have to carry that weight yourself. You can think clearly because your thinking is anchored in reality. You can act wisely because your actions are informed by truth. You can face uncertainty without being destroyed by it because your stability is not dependent on your circumstances remaining manageable. It is dependent on a God who is not threatened by any of them. Start here. Return here. Every lesson that follows is, in one way or another, an application and expression of this one. Lesson 2. Wisdom must be actively and relentlessly pursued. Blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding, for she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. Proverbs 3:13-14. Proverbs personifies wisdom as a woman standing in the open streets, raising her voice in the public square, calling out to everyone who passes, inviting them to come and learn. She is not hidden away in an ivory tower accessible only to the educated elite. She's not whispering to a select few from behind closed doors. She is available, present, accessible to anyone who will genuinely seek her. But she demands something from you in return. Active, sustained, intentional pursuit. One of the most costly assumptions you can make about wisdom is the assumption that it will come automatically with the passage of time. It will not. The world is full of older people who are profoundly, demonstrably unwise, whose decades of experience have only calcified their existing errors rather than correcting them. And the world also contains young people who carry a depth and quality of wisdom that puts many of their elders to shame. The difference is not years, it is never years alone. The difference is hunger, the persistent active desire to understand things rightly and the willingness to do the work that genuine understanding requires. Proverbs tells us that wisdom is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. Think carefully about what that means in genuinely practical terms. Every investment decision you ever make will be shaped by the quality of your thinking. Every relationship choice, every professional move, every response to crisis, every moment of moral decision, all of it will be shaped by how wise you are. Which means that the single highest return investment you can make in your entire life is the investment in becoming wiser. Pursue wisdom the way you pursue things that genuinely matter to you. Give it your best hours, not your leftover ones. Read with intention. Sit with difficult questions rather than lunging at the first comfortable answer. Seek out counsel from people who are further down the road than you are. Pray with genuine humility for understanding. Wisdom is available to you, but she consistently and reliably rewards those who seek her with diligence, rather than those who simply wish they had more of her. Lesson 3. Trust God with the things you cannot see. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Proverbs 3:5-6. This is perhaps the single most quoted passage in the entire book of Proverbs, and it has become that because it strikes at one of the deepest and most persistent tensions in human experience, the tension between the very human desire to be in control and the unavoidable reality of having to trust something beyond yourself. The instruction to lean not on your own understanding is not, as it is sometimes misread, a command to stop thinking. God gave you a mind, and he expects you to use it with full engagement and diligence. What this verse is identifying and warning against is a subtler and more dangerous error, the tendency to believe that your perspective on a situation is complete. The tendency to trust your own judgment as though you have access to all the relevant information, can see every angle, understand every consequence, and are therefore capable of navigating your life without reference to a wisdom greater than your own. You cannot see everything. You do not know the end from the beginning. You cannot know what is around the corner that you have not yet reached, what the effects of your decisions will be in 10 or 20 years, what unseen forces are already at work in your circumstances, what is going on in the hearts of the people your choices will affect. God knows all of these things simultaneously and completely. And Proverbs is saying, in the gap between what you can see and what is actually real, trust him. This is not passive resignation to whatever happens. Submitting your ways to God is an active, daily, disciplined practice. It means genuinely praying before you decide, not just informing God of what you have already decided. It means checking your plans honestly against his word. It means remaining open to redirection even when you were confident and committed in your course. It means being the kind of person who can say, when things do not go as planned, "Not my will, but yours." And the promise attached to this posture is extraordinary. He will make your paths straight, not smooth necessarily, not free of obstacles or difficulty, but straight, purposeful, guided, ultimately moving towards something good that he can see even when you cannot. Lesson 4. Guard your heart above everything else. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Proverbs 4:23. The heart, in the biblical and particularly in the Hebraic sense, is not primarily your emotional center in the limited way we tend to use the word. It is the seat of your will and your desires, your values and your deepest commitments, your vision for what life is and what it is for. It is the core of who you are, the wellspring from which all of your actual behavior flows. And Proverbs says, with the weight of above all else, guard it. What does it mean in practice to guard your heart? It means being genuinely, consistently intentional about what you allow access to your inner world, what you consume, the media you watch and the way you watch it, the music that forms the soundtrack of your days, the conversations you willingly participate in, the environments you choose to inhabit, the relationships you invest your deepest energy in. All of it is constantly and relentlessly shaping your heart. Whether you are consciously aware of the shaping process or not, you do not arrive at a corrupted character suddenly through some single catastrophic decision. You arrive there through a long accumulation of small, unchecked, unconsidered inputs that slowly reshape what you love, what you fear, what you want, and what you believe. In an era of algorithmically curated content, constant social media exposure, and information overload that has no precedent in human history, this lesson has never been more urgent or more demanding. The algorithm does not care about the state of your soul. It does not care about your long-term flourishing or your character or your relationships or your spiritual health. It cares about your attention because your attention is its product. And if you are not intentionally, deliberately, consistently guarding what has access to your heart, something else will shape it. And that something may be cynicism, fear, lust, pride, bitterness, despair, or any number of other forces that are actively hostile to the wise life. Guard your heart. Not by building a wall that keeps all of life out, but by being a wise and discerning gatekeeper, one who knows what belongs inside and what does not, and who has the courage and the clarity to act accordingly. Lesson 5. The tongue has the power of life and death. The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Proverbs 18:21. If you were to count the number of times the Book of Proverbs returns to the subject of speech, the words we use, the way we speak, what we say and what we refrain from saying, how we speak about others when they are not present, you would find that it is one of the single most addressed topics in the entire book. This is not accidental, and it is not a cultural quirk. The writers of Proverbs understood something that modern neuroscience and psychology are only beginning to document with the precision of research. The words we speak are not neutral sounds that travel through the air and dissolve into nothing. They shape reality. They shape the inner worlds of the people who hear them. They shape cultures and communities, and they shape our own souls in ways we often do not notice until the shaping has already happened. The tongue has the power of life and death. Sit with that for a moment. Think about the words that were spoken over you at a critical moment in your life. Words that built something in you, that gave you courage when you had none left, that made you believe something was possible that you had stopped believing, that communicated to you in a moment of deep vulnerability that you were loved, that you mattered, that you were seen. Those words are still alive in you. You can probably trace specific things about who you are today directly back to specific things someone said to you at a defining moment. Now think about the other kind. The words that cut, the words that diminished you, that planted seeds of self-doubt that you are still uprooting decades later, that named you by your failures rather than your potential, that communicated subtly or openly that you were not enough. Those words are still alive in you too. Words are not merely sounds. They are seeds that take root in the soul and produce fruit of life or of death, often long after the moment of speaking has passed from memory. What are you planting with your words? In your family, in your friendships, in your workplace, in the casual conversations that feel low stakes? Are you consistently, habitually speaking life, encouragement, truth, genuine affirmation? The kind of honest challenge that comes wrapped in genuine love? Or are you speaking death, criticism that tears down, gossip that poisons, silence where encouragement was needed, careless words that you threw like stones because you were frustrated and never considered where they landed? The wisdom of Proverbs on this subject is not a call to mere social nicety. It is a call to understand the profound, lasting, moral weight of every conversation you participate in. You are always speaking either life or death. The question is, which? Lesson 6. Pride destroys. Precisely what it claims to protect. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Proverbs 16:18. This is one of the most famous lines in Proverbs, and history has validated it so many times, across so many cultures, in so many domains, that it has long since escaped the book and become a proverb within culture itself. We have all witnessed the pattern. The leader whose confidence in their own judgment became so absolute that they could no longer receive counsel, who made a catastrophic decision that everyone around them could see coming except the person making it. The marriage that crumbled, not under the weight of any single dramatic event, but under the steady, grinding pressure of one partner's refusal to be wrong, to apologize, to acknowledge their own part in the damage. The business that failed, not because the market was unkind, but because its founders could not hear the clearly spoken warning signs from the people closest to them. But pride is subtler than its most obvious manifestations, and that subtlety is precisely what makes it so dangerous. Pride is not always the loud, bragging arrogance that is easy to recognize from across the room. It is often quieter than that. It is the inner, largely unconscious conviction that you do not need what you actually need: correction, accountability, help, God. It is the settled assumption that your perspective on a given situation is the most accurate one available, not because you have examined all the perspectives, but simply because it is yours. It is the inability to say, "I was wrong," without your identity threatening to collapse around the admission. And it is devastating in its effects precisely because it makes the person who has it incapable of receiving the very things that could save them. Pride closes the ears to wise counsel at the exact moment when wise counsel is most needed. It hardens the heart against the very corrections that would prevent the fall that is coming. Proverbs does not call us to false humility, the passive, self-deprecating posture that denies genuine gifts, refuses to take initiative, and calls the refusal of responsibility a form of virtue. It calls us to honest humility, knowing clearly what you know, but equally clearly knowing what you do not know, and remaining genuinely teachable in both areas. The person who can say, simply and without drama, "I was wrong about that," or "I need help with this," or "I don't actually know enough to have a strong opinion here," that person is not weak. They are exhibiting one of the most foundational marks of wisdom that Proverbs describes. They are the ones who survive the inevitable falls of life and come back from them stronger and wiser than before. Lesson 7. Choose your friends and companions with extraordinary care. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Proverbs 13:20. Your closest relationships are not neutral influences in your life. They are among the most powerful shaping forces you will ever encounter. They are either consistently and cumulatively lifting you toward wisdom and greater flourishing, or they are, gradually and often imperceptibly, pulling you away from it. This is not cynical. It is not a counsel of cold relational calculation. It is simply an honest and accurate observation about how human beings are formed. We become like the people we spend the most time with. Their assumptions about what is normal seep into ours. Their values and habits and ways of seeing the world begin to shape ours. Their vision for what life is, expansive or contracted, faith-filled or cynical, generous or grasping, begins to form the lens through which we see our own possibilities. Proverbs is unambiguous and direct about this. Walk with the wise and become wise. Note the precision of the language, not observe the wise from a distance, not be acquainted with the wise when convenient, but walk with them. Proximity matters. Sustained, intentional, close relationship with people who are genuinely wise will, over time, make you wiser. Not because wisdom is transmitted like a virus through casual contact, but because wisdom, lived out in proximity to you, becomes visible and comprehensible in ways that wisdom described in a book, however excellent the book, cannot fully replicate. The second half of this verse is equally direct. A companion of fools suffers harm. Not may suffer harm. Not sometimes experiences negative consequences, suffers harm. The relationship between the quality of your companions and the direction of your life is, according to Proverbs, that reliable and that consequential. This also means having the courage, and it does require genuine courage, to honestly evaluate the relationships you are currently investing the most in. Are the people closest to you making you more honest, more generous, more courageous, more patient, more faithful? Or are you slowly, almost without noticing, becoming more cynical, more comfortable with compromise, more willing to shade the truth, more conformed to a vision of life that is smaller and less generous than the one you were made for? You are allowed, in fact you are genuinely called, to be selective about who you walk with. That is not elitism. It is stewardship of the one life you have been given. Lesson 8. Hard work is not optional, it is the path. Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. Proverbs 10:4. Proverbs has zero patience for laziness, and it makes no apologies for that. In a cultural moment that has increasingly romanticized passive income, lifestyle shortcuts, the fantasy of significant returns requiring minimal effort, and the various iterations of working smarter, not harder, that serve primarily as rationalizations for working less, this lesson lands with particular, uncomfortable force. The Book of Proverbs celebrates the person who works hard, who shows up consistently when showing up is difficult, who does not manufacture elaborate excuses for why this particular season is not the right moment to apply full effort, who pushes through difficulty rather than perpetually waiting for easier conditions. But it is important to be clear about what Proverbs is and is not claiming here. This is not a prosperity gospel. Proverbs does not promise that hard work will always and automatically translate into financial wealth. The world is not a perfectly fair place, and Proverbs knows this. It addresses injustice and the suffering of the righteous with considerable honesty elsewhere in its pages. What it does promise is something more like a consistent pattern. There is a reliable relationship between genuine diligence and meaningful, lasting outcome. And there is an equally reliable relationship between habitual laziness and fruitlessness, not as a punishment from God, but as the natural and predictable consequence of what happens when effort is consistently withheld. But the lesson extends well beyond finances. Hard work in Proverbs is fundamentally a posture of character. The diligent person takes their responsibilities seriously across every domain of life. They do not cut corners in their marriages or their parenting or their spiritual life any more than they cut corners in their professional work. They understand in a deep and practical way that anything genuinely worth having requires sustained, consistent effort. They are not waiting around for inspiration to appear before they begin. They are already at work, and the inspiration often comes in the middle of the work, not before it. There is also a genuinely spiritual dimension to this that is worth not rushing past. God Himself is a worker. The opening chapters of Scripture describe Him creating, shaping, forming, filling, naming, working with unmistakable intentionality and energy. To work diligently is, in some real sense, to reflect and honor the character of the God in whose image we are made. Lesson 9. Generosity is one of the most powerful wisdom practices. One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. Proverbs 11:24. This is one of the most startlingly counterintuitive statements in the entire Book of Proverbs, and yet experience, the kind of wide, long, accumulated experience that Proverbs draws on throughout its pages, consistently validates it. The person who holds everything tightly, who hoards and withholds, who lives in a constant underlying anxiety about not having enough and so never releases what they have, that person does not end up richer for their caution. They end up impoverished in ways that extend well beyond any financial accounting. And the person who gives freely, who holds resources loosely, who is genuinely and consistently generous with their money, their time, their attention, their encouragement, their energy, that person somehow, repeatedly, finds themselves with more to give. Generosity is a wisdom practice because it requires you to believe something that runs directly against the fearful, self-protective logic of scarcity. It requires you to operate from the assumption that there is enough, that God is a provider who does not operate on a budget, that the universe under His governance is not a closed, zero-sum system where everything you give away is simply gone, that what you release with a generous heart can and often does return to you in forms and through channels you did not anticipate. That is not naive. That is faith. And Proverbs consistently and enthusiastically honors it. Generosity also does something of great significance to the inner life of the person who practices it. It progressively loosens the grip that money, possessions, status, and security can slowly acquire over our hearts, often without our full awareness. Every genuine act of generosity is a small declaration of freedom. Freedom from the tyranny of accumulation, freedom from the quiet terror of not enough, freedom to be the kind of person whose open hand is a consistent and visible reflection of a genuinely open heart toward God and toward others. Lesson 10. Discipline your children because you love them, not despite it. Whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. And Proverbs 13:24. This proverb is one of the most frequently misread in the book, and it is important to engage with it honestly and thoughtfully. It is not primarily a conversation about the mechanics of physical discipline, though it has historically been interpreted that way. The deeper and more enduring message of this verse is about the nature of love itself, about what genuine parental love actually looks like when it is working as it should. True love, Proverbs is telling us, is not the love that removes every obstacle from a child's path, absorbs every consequence of their poor choices, and ensures that they are never required to encounter the friction that produces character. True love is the love that is willing to hold the line when holding the line is uncomfortable. The love that can say no firmly and consistently even when no produces tears, anger, or the accusation that you are the worst parent who has ever existed. The love that can apply appropriate consequences even when you would find it far easier and far more pleasant to simply let it go. The devastating argument Proverbs is making here is this: The parent who cannot bring themselves to discipline their child, whose desire to see their child happy in every immediate moment overrides their commitment to the child's long-term formation. That parent is not demonstrating love. They are demonstrating something that feels like love, but functions more like a form of loving indulgence that will, over time, significantly harm the child it claims to cherish. Children need boundaries. They need to experience the reliable reality that actions have consequences. They need the formative experience of having a loving authority in their lives who holds firm even when they push back with everything they have. Because that experience forms in them a capacity for self-discipline, a respect for healthy authority, and a resilience in the face of constraint that will serve them in every area of life for as long as they live. The specifics of how discipline is appropriately applied will always vary by child, by temperament, by age, and by context. But the principle does not change. Love your children enough to do the harder, slower, less immediately gratifying work of formation, not just the easier, more immediately pleasant work of indulgence. Lesson 11. A good reputation is worth more than all the riches in the world. A good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold. Proverbs 22. In a world that is deeply, perhaps obsessively, preoccupied with net worth and publicly visible metrics, follower counts, engagement rates, revenue figures, titles on business cards, the size of the house and the make of the car, Proverbs offers a quiet but genuinely devastating reorientation of values. A good name is worth more than great riches. Not as poetry, not as spiritual hyperbole designed to make poor people feel better about not having money, as a sincere, accurate statement about what is actually most worth building over the course of a human life. Your reputation is the accumulated weight of your actual character across time. It is what people know to be genuinely true about you when they reflect honestly on their experience of you, when there is no social pressure to be flattering. Are you trustworthy? Do you consistently do what you say you will do? Are you kind in the ordinary, unremarkable moments when no one of particular importance is watching? Do you treat people with genuine dignity, regardless of what they currently can or cannot do for you? Are you honest, not just in the large, high-stakes situations where dishonesty would be obviously costly, but in the small ones, where a slight exaggeration or a convenient omission would serve you and be very unlikely to ever be discovered? These things, the quality and consistency of your character over long stretches of ordinary time, are your true legacy. Money can be lost in a single night. Status can evaporate with a single scandal. Titles can be stripped away by a single board decision. But a good name, built patiently through years of humble, honest, consistent, faithful living, is durable in a way that almost nothing else is. It opens doors that no amount of money can open. It creates a warmth and trust in the hearts of people who know you that no personal branding strategy can manufacture. And it outlives you, often by decades, in the memories and the lives of everyone whose path yours crossed well. Build your name deliberately, thoughtfully, and with the long view. Understand that you are building it whether you are consciously paying attention to the building process or not. Every interaction, every decision, every moment of integrity, held or compromise made, every single one is a deposit or a withdrawal in the account of who you actually are. Lesson 12. Seek wise counsel. Before every significant decision. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. Proverbs 15:22. Proverbs places enormous and repeated emphasis on the value of counsel, and its consistency on this point suggests that the failure to seek it is one of the most common and consequential errors that otherwise intelligent, capable people make. The wise person does not make significant decisions in isolation, no matter how confident they feel, no matter how clear things seem from where they are standing. They seek out people who know more than they do in relevant areas, who can perceive what they cannot perceive from their particular vantage point, who have the established relationship and the genuine care for you required to tell you what you need to hear rather than what you want to hear. This is considerably harder in practice than it sounds in principle, because most of us have a powerful and largely unacknowledged bias towards seeking validation rather than genuine counsel. We have usually already decided what we want to do before we ask for input, and what we are really looking for is someone who will confirm that our existing plan is brilliant. That is not counsel. That is an echo chamber. It is comfortable and temporarily reassuring, but it leaves you exactly as exposed to error as you were before you asked. Real counsel means genuinely, vulnerably opening your plans and your thinking to scrutiny. It means being willing to hear that your analysis is incomplete, that your plan has a significant flaw, that the thing you are most excited about is the thing most likely to go wrong. And it means adjusting your course accordingly, even when that adjustment is inconvenient and even when your ego resists it. Note that Proverbs specifies many advisors rather than one. This is because no single person, however wise, has a complete perspective on any complex situation. Multiple voices representing different kinds of experience, different expertise, different temperamental perspectives, and different relationships to the situation. Together they will illuminate aspects of your decision that you and any single advisor would simply have missed. The most effective leaders, the wisest families, and the healthiest organizations are almost always ones that have built cultures where seeking counsel is genuinely valued, where admitting uncertainty is safe, and where the decision-making process is consistently improved by the diversity of voices contributing to it. Lesson 13. Honesty is absolutely non-negotiable. The Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in people who are trustworthy. And take Proverbs 12:22. Proverbs is not gentle or ambiguous on the subject of honesty. It does not treat dishonesty as a minor character flaw to be tolerated in otherwise admirable people or excused as a harmless social lubricant. The language is unsparing. The Lord detests lying lips, and the positive counterpart is equally powerful. He delights in those who are trustworthy. Delights, not merely approves of, not simply permits, but actively, genuinely delights in. Why does honesty matter so profoundly at such a level? Because the entire fabric of human society, every relationship, every institution, every functioning economy, every community of any kind at any scale, depends on the reliable exchange of truth. When people stop telling each other the truth, trust collapses. And when trust collapses, everything that requires trust to function begins to fail. Marriage, friendship, business, government, family, church, all of it requires a baseline of truthfulness to operate at any level of genuine health. The progressive erosion of that baseline does not produce freedom. It produces the kind of social fragmentation and institutional dysfunction that we are increasingly and uncomfortably observing around us. Honesty also forms the foundation of self-knowledge, and this dimension of its importance is perhaps less often discussed, but equally significant. The person who lies to others has almost invariably already learned, first, to lie to themselves. They have developed a sophisticated set of internal narratives whose primary function is to protect them from the discomfort of honest self-appraisal, to maintain a flattering image of themselves that does not have to be reconciled with the evidence of their actual behavior. And that self-deception is ultimately the most dangerous kind of dishonesty because it prevents the very self-knowledge and self-correction that wisdom requires as its constant raw material. Be the person whose word means something. Be the person who tells the truth when it is inconvenient, when it costs you something real, when a small lie or a careful omission would have been so easy and so unlikely to be discovered. Your integrity is not a commodity you can trade for short-term benefit and then buy back later. Once compromised habitually, it is very difficult to recover. Lesson 14. Anger must be understood, managed, and mastered. A hot-tempered person stirs up conflict, but the one who is patient calms a quarrel. Proverbs 15:18. Proverbs returns to the subject of anger, patience, and the management of emotional temperature more than almost any other practical wisdom topic. And this repetition is itself instructive. The writers of Proverbs clearly understood, through long observation of human behavior, that the ability or inability to manage our own anger is one of the most consequential variables in the quality of our relationships, our leadership, our families, and our broader influence in the world. The hot-tempered person is not simply unpleasant to be around, though they are certainly that. More significantly, they are a consistent, reliable source of destruction in every environment they inhabit. They leave trails of damaged relationships, escalated conflicts that never needed to escalate, regrettable words that cannot be unsaid, and broken trust that requires enormous time and effort to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. The pattern repeats itself in their marriage, in their parenting, in their workplace, in their friendships, until the pattern itself becomes the defining story of their impact on the people around them. The patient person, the person who has developed the capacity to feel the heat of anger rising in them and to choose, in that moment, not to release it destructively, is something genuinely different. Their measured, thoughtful response to provocation has the power to de-escalate situations that would otherwise spiral into cycles of mutual retaliation. In a family or a workplace or a community, a single genuinely patient person can fundamentally transform the entire culture of how conflict is handled, simply through the consistent modeling of a better alternative. Mastering anger does not mean suppressing it indefinitely or pretending it does not exist. Anger is a signal. It tells you that something is wrong, that a boundary has been violated, that an injustice has occurred, that something you love is being threatened. The question is never whether you will feel it. The question is what you choose to do with it in the critical moments when it is most intense. The wise person feels the anger fully and honestly, processes it with integrity, and then responds with purposeful, measured, constructive action, rather than the reactive explosion that delivers momentary satisfaction and lasting damage. Lesson 15. The way you handle money reveals your character. Dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. Adnam, Proverbs 13:11. Proverbs has a great deal to say about money, not because money is the most important thing in life, but because how we handle money is one of the most consistently revealing indicators of character that exists. How you earn, how you save, how you spend, how you give, what financial risks you are willing to take, and what ethical lines you are or are not willing to cross in pursuit of financial gain. These things are not separate from your spiritual and moral life. They are among its most concrete and observable expressions. The contrast in this proverb is precise and instructive. Money gained dishonestly or through shortcuts versus money gathered little by little through patient, consistent, honest work. The first dwindles, the second grows. This is not merely an observation about financial mechanics, though the financial observation is real enough. It is a statement about the relationship between character and sustainability, about the fact that what is built on honesty and consistent effort tends to last, and what is built on shortcuts and compromise tends to unravel. Money earned through integrity and diligent patient work carries a quality and a stability that money gained through shortcuts simply cannot replicate. When you know that what you have has been built honestly, that it represents real value you have genuinely created or genuinely earned, it means something. It is a foundation you can actually stand on without the underlying anxiety of someone who is never quite sure when the truth of how they got here is going to catch up with them. And the reverse, as Proverbs notes consistently, is equally true. The person who is willing to compromise their ethics in pursuit of financial advantage will find, eventually, that the shortcuts catch up with them. Not always dramatically, not always publicly, but in the slow erosion of integrity that makes each subsequent compromise easier and each subsequent line slightly easier to cross, until the person they have become in the process of building what they have is someone they would not have recognized or respected at the beginning of the journey. Lesson 16. Hope deferred. Breaks the heart, and God sees it. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. Proverbs 13-12. This proverb is not a prescriptive instruction, it is an observation, and it is one of the most emotionally honest and spiritually compassionate observations in all of Scripture. When the things we have hoped for, prayed for, worked toward, waited for, trusted God for across months and years, when those things do not come, when the answer remains silence or no, or a not yet that stretches so long it begins to feel indistinguishable from never, something in us genuinely breaks. The heart grows sick. There is no softer or more accurate way to describe it. This is important to name clearly and without minimization, because far too much Christian teaching has either implicitly or explicitly suggested that genuine faith should somehow immunize a person against the grief of unanswered hopes, as though the sickness of heart were itself evidence of insufficient trust in God. Proverbs does not take that position. It acknowledges the reality of that sickness with clear-eyed, compassionate honesty. If you have been waiting a long time for a spouse, for a child, for physical healing, for a financial breakthrough, for a broken relationship to be restored, for a season of difficulty to end, and your heart is genuinely sick with the weight of the waiting, Proverbs sees you. God, who inspired these words, sees you. And the second half of this proverb is not a dismissal of the first. It does not say, get over it. It says, a longing fulfilled is a tree of life, not merely a relief. Not just the end of waiting, a tree of life, something profoundly, abundantly, generatively life-giving. The fulfillment of genuine, long-held, costly hope has a depth of meaning and a quality of life in it that the quick and easy answer could never have produced. Hold on. Keep hoping. The waiting itself may be the very thing that gives the fulfillment its transforming power when it finally arrives. Lesson 17. Envy is a poison that rots you from the inside. A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. Proverbs 14:30. Modern medical and psychological research has confirmed what Proverbs identified with clear-eyed accuracy thousands of years ago. The state of your inner life has direct, measurable, and significant effects on your physical health. Chronic stress, unresolved resentment, and habitual envy are not merely emotional experiences. They are physiological ones. The body keeps the score of what the heart carries, and envy, in particular, is described by Proverbs with striking physical language. It rots the bones. It decays a person from the inside. It is not a passing emotional inconvenience. It is a corrosive force. Envy is a particularly insidious emotion because it is so easy to mistake it for other, more socially acceptable things. It presents itself as righteous indignation about fairness. It disguises itself as ambition. It hides behind concern for justice, But at its core, envy is the particular grief and resentment that arises because someone else has what you want. And it is distinct from admiration, which can genuinely inspire and motivate you to grow. In a crucial way, envy does not want to become like the person who has what you long for. It wants that person not to have it. It wants to level the playing field downward. And it makes you miserable with a special efficiency because there will always, without exception, be someone who has something you do not have. The antidote Proverbs offers is a heart at peace, contentment, gratitude. The settled, chosen, daily practiced sense of sufficiency that comes from genuinely knowing that God is your provider, that His specific plan for your specific life is not inferior to His plan for anyone whose life looks more enviable from the outside, and that what you have been given in this exact season is, in fact, enough to work with. That peace does not come automatically. It is not a personality type. It is a spiritual discipline, a daily, active, intentional choice to refuse the comparison that envy lives on and to return again to gratitude for the grace that is genuinely, specifically, abundantly yours right now. Lesson 18, the righteous care about justice for the poor and vulnerable. The righteous care about justice for the poor, but the wicked have no such concern. Proverbs 29:7. This lesson matters enormously, and it matters in part because it is so easy to miss or to quietly sidestep in communities that emphasize personal piety and individual virtue. True wisdom, according to Proverbs, is never merely a matter of private morality. It always has a public, social, communal dimension. The person who is genuinely wise, genuinely righteous, genuinely and deeply oriented toward the God of the Bible, that person cares about the poor. Not as a political performance, not as a virtue signal designed to generate approval from the right audience, but as the natural, organic, unavoidable expression of a heart that has genuinely been shaped by the values and the character of God. Throughout Proverbs, consistent practical care for the vulnerable, the poor, the widow, the marginalized, the person who cannot repay your kindness and has no leverage over you whatsoever, is presented not as an optional add-on to the wise life, but as one of its most fundamental and non-negotiable characteristics. The person who claims wisdom, who speaks fluently about the fear of the Lord and the importance of integrity, while remaining entirely indifferent to the suffering of people around them who have less, that person has, according to Proverbs, fundamentally misunderstood what wisdom is. They have mistaken sophistication for wisdom, which is one of the most common and most costly errors a religiously serious person can make. This is a searching, uncomfortable, genuinely personal question for all of us. Not just am I personally virtuous in the ways that are most visible and most socially rewarded in my community, but am I actually paying attention to the people who have less? Am I using whatever measure of influence, resources, time, and voice I have to serve and advocate for those who are genuinely in need? The righteous care about this. The wise take it seriously. If we want to be counted among them, we must reckon honestly with this question. Lesson 19. Diligent planning is an act of wisdom and respect. The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. Proverbs 21:5. There is a specific and particularly consequential form of foolishness that Proverbs identifies and addresses repeatedly. The foolishness of impulsive action, of moving before you have genuinely thought things through, of valuing speed so highly that substance is sacrificed to it. Haste leads to poverty, not sometimes, not in particularly unlucky circumstances, but as surely as a consistent pattern produces a consistent result. The impulsive decision, the reactive commitment, the plan launched before it was genuinely ready. These things have a predictable outcome, and Proverbs does not shy away from naming it. The contrast is the diligent planner. not the person who plans endlessly and theoretically and never commits to action. Proverbs has no more patience for that paralysis than it does for reckless impulsivity, but the person who thinks with genuine care before they act, who considers honestly and fully the costs, the steps, the risks, the resources required, and the realistic probability of success before making a commitment, who maps with clear-eyed diligence the distance between where they currently are and where they intend to go, and who plans the path accordingly. Planning is fundamentally an act of respect. It is respect for the resources being invested, the time, the money, the emotional energy, the relational capital that every significant undertaking requires. It is respect for the other people who will be affected by the quality of the outcome. It is respect for the goal itself, a declaration that the goal is worth the time and the thought and the honest assessment required to pursue it intelligently rather than just enthusiastically. The impulsive person communicates, whether they intend to or not, that they do not quite respect any of these things sufficiently. The diligent planner does, and the difference in outcomes over time is not subtle. Lesson 20. Where there is no vision. From God, everything unravels. Where there is no revelation, people cast off restraint, but blessed is the one who heeds wisdom's instruction. Proverbs 29:18. This verse is frequently quoted in leadership and organizational contexts as though it is primarily about vision casting and strategic goal setting. And while those applications are not entirely wrong, they miss the deeper and more significant point. The word translated revelation here is the Hebrew shazon, prophetic vision, divine direction, the word of God made active in the life of a community. The verse is saying something with much higher stakes than organizational strategy. Where there is no word from God, no moral framework drawn from transcendent authority, no reference point beyond human opinion and preference, people unravel. They cast off restraint. The inner architecture that gives individual lives and communities coherent shape and sustainable direction collapses. This is not merely a theological statement, it is an observable sociological phenomenon. We are in the middle of a large-scale cultural experiment in what happens when societies progressively abandon the moral frameworks provided by faith and replace them with the confident assertion that human reason alone is a sufficient guide. The results are not the liberation that was confidently promised. The results, increasingly visible and increasingly discussed, even by people with no religious commitments, are disorientation, fragmentation, anxiety, and the restless, insatiable hunger of people who have lost the thread that connected them to any coherent sense of meaning, direction, or responsibility to something beyond themselves. Wisdom, Proverbs tells us, includes receiving and genuinely heeding the revelation God has given. Not just knowing what God says in an abstract intellectual way that produces no change in actual behavior, but ordering your life around it, having the transcendent reference point that gives everything else its proper place and its proper weight. This is not restriction dressed up in spiritual language. It is the very foundation on which genuine human freedom, genuine human community, and genuine human flourishing are actually built. Lesson 21. A gentle answer is more powerful than you think. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Proverbs 15:1. This is one of the most immediately and practically applicable pieces of wisdom in the entire Book of Proverbs. And if you have been alive long enough to have had difficult conversations with difficult people in difficult moments, you have already experienced its truth firsthand. You come into a conversation already heated, already defensive, already carrying the emotional charge of whatever led to this moment. And the person you are speaking with responds with genuine gentleness, not weakness, not appeasement, not dishonesty. but a measured, warm, unhurried, genuinely calm response, and something in you that was braced and ready for battle simply releases. The fight that was coming is no longer coming. A gentle answer turns away wrath. It does this not because gentleness is strategically clever, though it is, but because it communicates something to the person in conflict with you that the harsh response could never communicate. That you are not their enemy, that you are not here to win a battle at their expense, that you are actually interested in them as a human being and in a genuine resolution that serves both of you. The harsh word does the opposite, and Proverbs is clear and honest about it. The harsh response may feel satisfying for a moment, the deep, primitive satisfaction of striking back, of refusing to absorb an offense without responding in kind, of asserting yourself against someone who has pushed. But Proverbs says it stirs up anger, it escalates. It takes a situation that might have been resolved and throws enough fuel on it to ensure that resolution becomes vastly more difficult and more distant. Developing the genuine capacity for a gentle answer, not a passive-aggressive whisper that is quiet on the surface and corrosive underneath, but an actually warm, measured, honest, and respectful response delivered in moments of genuine provocation, is one of the most transformative relational and leadership skills you will ever develop. It requires a real degree of ego management, but its effects on every relationship you are in are immeasurable. Lesson 22. Integrity in small things builds the character for large ones. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much, and whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. Luke 16:10. Proverbs consistently returns to the theme of integrity, and central to everything it says on this subject is the foundational understanding that character is not situational. You do not have a high-stakes version of yourself and a separate, different, low-stakes version of yourself. You have one character, one set of deep habits and instilled tendencies, and that character expresses itself with remarkable consistency across every context, high stakes and low stakes alike. The way you behave when no one of consequence is watching. The way you treat the person who cannot do anything for you. The way you handle a small responsibility when the level of external accountability is low. These are not separate from your character. They are your character, being revealed in its most honest and unguarded form. This means that the cultivation of wisdom and integrity cannot be saved for the big moments. You cannot coast through the ordinary days in low integrity mode and then expect a different, higher integrity version of yourself to show up when the stakes are genuinely high. Character is built in the small moments, because the small moments are the majority of the moments. You do not suddenly become brave in a crisis if you have spent years avoiding small, low-stakes opportunities to practice courage. You do not suddenly become honest under high pressure if you have allowed yourself habitual small dishonesties in circumstances where the cost of honesty was minimal. Every small choice to do the right thing when it would be easier and more convenient not to is not a minor nicety. It is an investment in the specific kind of person you will be when the genuinely high-stakes moments arrive. And they will arrive. Lesson 23. The heart of every leader is in God's hand. In the Lord's hand, the king's heart is a stream of water that he channels toward all who please him. Proverbs 21:1. This is a verse for everyone who has ever felt genuinely powerless in the face of systems, structures, and authorities that seem to hold all of the relevant power and show no particular interest in using it wisely or justly. Proverbs is making a claim that is either deeply reassuring or deeply uncomfortable, depending on where you are standing. Even the most powerful human leaders, kings, rulers, executives, governments, institutions, are not ultimately in control. The heart of the king is in God's hand. He channels it as he determines. The most entrenched human authority in the world is not beyond the reach of divine governance. This is emphatically not a verse for passive fatalism, for the kind of resigned acceptance that says nothing I do matters, because God is in control anyway. It is a verse for settled trust, the specific kind of trust that becomes possible when you have done everything within your actual power and influence, and the outcome still depends on the decision of someone above you who does not answer to you in any way. It means that when you have advocated honestly and clearly for what is right, worked with full diligence, prayed with genuine faith, and the outcome still hinges on a decision being made in a room you have no access to by people who have shown no particular inclination to choose wisely, you can genuinely release that into the hands of God. He is not helpless before human stubbornness or human authority. He has moved the hearts of the most resistant, the most self-interested, and the most apparently impervious people in history. Trust him with the outcomes that are genuinely beyond your reach. Lesson 24. Wisdom builds the house that everything else lives in. By wisdom, a house is built, and through understanding it is established. Through knowledge, its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. Proverbs 24:3-4. Every family, every household, every community is being built right now, whether deliberately and intentionally or entirely by default. The question is never whether your household is being shaped. The question is what it is being shaped by, and whether you are a conscious, active participant in that shaping, or simply a passenger in a process driven by inertia, cultural default, and the accumulated weight of unexamined habits. Proverbs says, "The house built by wisdom, established through understanding, and furnished by knowledge, is the one filled with rare and beautiful treasures." Not as decoration, as the natural, organic outcome of a household whose foundation is right. Wisdom in the home means having and consistently acting from the long view. It means making decisions not primarily for the immediate comfort and happiness of your family in this moment, but for the long-term character, depth, and genuine flourishing of the people you are responsible for and to. It means leading with patience that is sustainable rather than discipline that is reactive. It means speaking with care, creating the kind of environment where truth is consistently honored and love is reliably present, so that the people who grow up in your home know what both feel like from the inside. Understanding in the home means genuinely, patiently trying to know the people you live with. Not managing them or performing the role of knowing them, but actually understanding their fears and their longings, their particular strengths and vulnerabilities, their deepest questions about themselves and the world. Knowledge here is not primarily academic. It is the rich, accumulated, hard-won practical wisdom that comes from paying sustained attention, learning honestly from the mistakes that every family makes, and growing together across time rather than simply aging alongside each other. The home built this way becomes a place of rare and beautiful treasures, not necessarily expensive or impressive things by any external measure, but the kind of deep relational richness, emotional safety, genuine spiritual depth, and warm, sustaining love that people spend entire lifetimes searching for and frequently never find. Lesson 25. Faithful wounds. From a friend are better than any flattery. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy flatters with their lips. Proverbs 27:6. You need people in your life who will tell you the truth, not people who are careless or malicious with the truth. That is not what this verse is describing, and Proverbs distinguishes carefully between wounds that come from genuine friendship and wounds that come from hostility, but people who care about your actual long-term well-being, enough to say the hard thing when the hard thing needs to be said. who will name the pattern they have observed in your behavior that concerns them, who will challenge the decision you are about to make that they can clearly see will cause you harm, who will tell you what they honestly see, even when what they honestly see is not what you want to hear. That kind of wound, delivered in genuine love, rooted in real friendship, offered with the best possible intent, can be trusted. It has your actual good in view. The enemy who flatters you is more dangerous than the friend who wounds you, not because the enemy is powerful, but because flattery is pleasant and truth is often uncomfortable, and the human heart is remarkably willing to prefer the pleasant over the accurate. Flattery leaves you exactly where it found you, perhaps even more settled in the things that are not working, more confident in the errors you have not yet recognized as errors, more surrounded by a version of reality that has been carefully arranged to be agreeable rather than true. And when the crisis comes, as it inevitably will, the flatterer will not be there. They were never invested in your actual well-being. They were invested in your approval. Seek out and actively protect relationships in which honest, loving, courageous truth can be exchanged in both directions. If you have even one such friend, guard that relationship with everything you have, and be that friend to someone else. The world has a genuine surplus of people who are willing and eager to tell us what we want to hear. It is desperately, urgently short of people with the courage, the love, and the relationship quality required to tell us what we actually need to hear. Lesson 26. Iron sharpens iron. Embrace the friction. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Proverbs 27:17. This verse has become a near cliché in certain communities, which is a shame because the actual image it contains is genuinely illuminating and genuinely uncomfortable in ways that the comfortable cliché tends to obscure. Iron on iron is not a gentle, pleasant process. It involves real friction, genuine resistance, sparks, heat, and the sustained, patient working of one surface against another. The result, a blade that is sharp, precise, and genuinely effective, is worth every moment of the difficult process. But the process itself is demanding. You do not get the sharp edge without accepting the friction. The relationships that genuinely sharpen you will not always be comfortable. They will challenge your thinking at its most confident and settled points. They will call you higher than you might have been willing to call yourself. They will ask questions you would rather not answer and raise issues you would rather not examine. They will create productive tension, the specific kind of tension that you are tempted to resolve by withdrawing from the relationship rather than by growing in the direction the tension is pointing. And if you only surround yourself in your closest relationships and your most influential communities with people who consistently agree with you, who never push back, who never bring a perspective that challenges yours, who always find your existing thinking entirely satisfactory, you will become dull, gradually, imperceptibly, but with absolute reliability. The mind and the character that are never challenged do not remain at their current level. They decline. You were not designed to sharpen yourself in isolation. You need others. And the ones who sharpen you most are often the ones who are, in the moment, the most uncomfortable to be around. Lesson 27. The wise inherit honor. They do not seize it. The wise inherit honor, but fools get only shame. Proverbs 3:35. Honor, genuine, lasting, deserved, unforced honor, is not seized by the person who wants it most. It is not the product of strategic personal branding or clever reputation management, or the sustained campaign of self-promotion that has become one of the defining features of public life in the social media era. Honor is inherited. It accrues over long stretches of time to those who have consistently lived wisely, who have treated people with genuine dignity, made honest and courageous decisions across ordinary circumstances, built lives characterized by authentic virtue rather than performed virtue, and who have done all of this without primarily doing it in order to be seen and admired for doing it. In a cultural environment that is deeply and exhaustingly preoccupied with visibility, personal brand, and the constant management of public perception, this lesson is quietly, radically revolutionary. The path to genuine honor is not to pursue honor directly. It is to pursue wisdom, to do the right thing consistently over time, in the small moments and the large ones, in the circumstances where it costs you something real, and the ones where it is easy, whether anyone of consequence is watching or not. The fool may achieve a moment of cheap and hollow success, a flash of attention and approval, a brief season of looking good by external measures. But Proverbs says it leads to shame, not necessarily because of a dramatic public collapse, but because honor that is not earned is not sustainable. And the gap between the public image and the private reality, eventually, one way or another, becomes visible. The wise person's path may be slower and less immediately impressive, but it leads somewhere real. Lesson 28. Do not wear yourself out. Chasing wealth. Do not wear yourself out to get rich. Do not trust your own cleverness. Cast but a glance at riches, and they are gone, for they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. Proverbs 23:4-5. Proverbs is remarkably and consistently honest about the seductive power of wealth and the particular danger of making its pursuit the organizing principle of your life. And this is worth noting clearly. This is not an anti-prosperity message. Proverbs enthusiastically commends diligence, planning, wise stewardship, and the building of financial security. These are genuinely good and wise things. What Proverbs warns against, with considerable force and memorable imagery, is the consuming, exhausting, identity-defining chase after riches for their own sake, the mode of life in which financial accumulation has displaced everything else as the primary goal. The image Proverbs uses is both vivid and, if you sit with it, almost darkly comedic. You run yourself ragged in pursuit of wealth. You sacrifice your health for it, your relationships for it, your integrity for it, your rest for it, the years of your children's childhoods for it. You finally have it in your hands. You glance up for a moment, and it has sprouted wings and flown away like an eagle. The market crashes, the business fails, the lawsuit happens, the medical crisis arrives. The investment that seemed certain dissolves, and what you traded for it is gone and cannot be recovered. We have all seen this story. Most of us know someone living it. The wisdom of Proverbs is not to avoid building financial stability. It is to hold financial goals in their proper place within a properly ordered life. Work hard, plan wisely, give generously, build what you can with integrity. But do not make the accumulation of wealth the center of your identity and the measure of your success. Hold it loosely, because it is, by its essential nature, temporary, and you are not. Lesson 29. Leave vengeance to God and find freedom in that. Do not say, "I'll pay you back for this wrong." Wait for the Lord, and he will avenge you. Proverbs 20:22. The impulse toward revenge is ancient, powerful, and feels, in the moment of its greatest intensity, almost entirely righteous. When someone wrongs you, genuinely, seriously, in ways that have caused real harm, everything in you wants to balance the scales, to ensure that they experience some measure of what they caused you to experience, to see justice served in the specific form you have decided it should take, on the timeline you have determined is appropriate, executed by your hand or at your direction. Proverbs counsels something different. Not because the desire for justice is wrong. The desire for justice is a profoundly God-given instinct, and Proverbs takes it seriously throughout. but because taking personal revenge places you in the position of judge over another human being, and you are not equipped for that position. You do not have perfect knowledge of all the relevant facts. You do not have perfectly pure motivation. The revenge impulse is almost always contaminated by hurt and pride in ways that distort your assessment of what justice actually requires. And the actions you take under the influence of the revenge impulse will, with near certainty, cause additional harm that was not required by justice and that you will later regret. Wait for the Lord. This is genuinely one of the most costly and demanding pieces of wisdom in the entire book. It requires a quality of faith, honest, sustained, sometimes agonizing faith, in the justice of God that is difficult to sustain when the wound is fresh and the desire for immediate resolution is overwhelming. It requires trusting that wrongs do not ultimately go unaddressed in a universe governed by a just and all-seeing God, and that His justice, when it comes in the form and time He determines, is more thorough, more accurate, and more truly satisfying than anything your revenge plan could have produced. Give it to Him, not as a technique for feeling better in the short term, but as a genuine act of trust in His character and His governance. Lesson 30. The human spirit is the lamp of God. The human spirit is the lamp of the Lord, searching out His inmost being. Proverbs 20:27. This is among the most theologically rich and personally searching verses in the entire book of Proverbs. God has given to every human being, regardless of faith background, regardless of the quality of their spiritual life, a spirit, a conscience, a capacity for genuine self-awareness and moral perception. And that capacity, Proverbs says, is the lamp of the Lord, something He has placed within you as an instrument for illuminating the deep interior places of who you actually are. This means that the voice of conscience, that quiet, persistent, uncomfortable nudge that tells you something is wrong, that you are not being fully honest with yourself or others, that the direction you are moving will eventually cost you something you cannot afford to lose, is not merely your own psychological anxiety or the internalized voice of people who criticized you in your past. It is the lamp of God doing what it was designed to do, illuminating the truth about your inner life so that you have the opportunity to respond to it. The practical implication is urgent. Do not silence your conscience. And yet many of us have developed a genuinely impressive skill at doing exactly that, at rationalizing away the discomfort of conviction, at constructing elaborate and entirely convincing justifications for things we already know at some deeper level to be wrong. Every time you successfully silence that voice, the lamp grows a little dimmer, and a significantly dimmed conscience, one that has been systematically overruled for long enough that it has largely stopped speaking, is one of the most dangerous conditions a human soul can find itself in, because it removes the very internal warning system that was designed to keep you from the worst of your own tendencies. Keep the lamp burning. Respond to conviction. Be the kind of person whose inner life is honestly maintained before God. Lesson 31. Give your children both deep roots and strong wings. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Proverbs 22:6. This verse is among the most cited in all of parenting literature, and it carries both a remarkable promise and a serious responsibility. The promise is this: the formation you invest in a child during their early years, the values you teach, the character you model, the habits you help them build, the vision of life you consistently demonstrate, does not simply evaporate when they grow up and step out of your immediate influence. It goes deep. It becomes embedded in who they are at a level that persists even through seasons of wandering, rebellion, or deliberate distancing. The truth planted with love and consistency in a child's formative years does not simply disappear. It waits, often for a very long time, but it waits. The responsibility, of course, is the training itself. Train up is not a passive description of what happens when a child grows up in a generally good environment. It is an active, deliberate, consistent, patient, intentional process. It means making choices every day about what kind of environment your home will be, what is talked about, what is modeled, what is expected, what is celebrated, what is corrected, what values are lived out versus merely professed. It means being genuinely present in your children's lives in ways that require significant time and emotional investment. In the way he should go carries a nuance that is worth attending to. Some commentators read this phrase not only as the way of wisdom and righteousness, but also as according to the child's own bent and unique design, suggesting that wise parenting requires both a commitment to universal truth and a sensitivity to the particular individual person that each child is. Both are required. One-size-fits-all formation that ignores the individuality of the child is not wise parenting. But child-centered formation that follows the child's preferences wherever they lead and never insists on truth is equally unwise. Hold both. It is the combination that produces the deep roots and the strong wings your child needs. Lesson 32. Do not withhold good when you have the power to give it. Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due when it is in your power to act. Proverbs 3:27. This verse has a clarity and a directness that cuts efficiently through a great many of our most convenient rationalizations. How often do we see a genuine need, a real opportunity to do something good for someone, to meet a need we have clearly noticed, recognize that we are fully capable of meeting it, and then find a reason not to? We are too busy right now, and will come back to it, and then do not. We tell ourselves it is not technically our responsibility, and someone better positioned will surely handle it. We feel a momentary conviction, and then allow it to be crowded out by the next item on the agenda. We postpone indefinitely the act of goodness that was fully in our power in the moment when we first recognized it. Proverbs cuts through all of that with refreshing directness. If the good is due, and you have the power to give it, give it. Now, do not withhold it. This applies across every domain and every scale of life. The word of genuine encouragement you could offer to someone who is clearly struggling. The practical help you could give a neighbor who is obviously in difficulty. The financial support you could provide to someone in real need. The sincere apology you owe to someone you have hurt, which you have been postponing because apologies are uncomfortable. The kindness you could extend to someone who is largely invisible to the people around them and who would be genuinely moved to be seen. Every day, in the ordinary flow of life, most of us encounter multiple situations where good is clearly due and we have the clear capacity to provide it. The wise person does not construct reasons to delay, they act. And in acting, they become the specific instrument through which God's goodness reaches a specific human being at a specific moment when it was genuinely needed. Lesson 33. The willingness to receive correction is a wisdom marker. Whoever heeds life-giving correction will be at home among the wise. Proverbs 15:31. Your response to correction. Not to correction in the abstract, but your actual real-time emotional and behavioral response in the specific moment when someone points out that you were wrong, is one of the clearest and most reliable indicators of your current wisdom level. More revealing in many ways than how you perform when things are going well. More honest than anything you might say about yourself in a moment of self-reflection. The natural, instinctive, thoroughly human response to being corrected is defensiveness. We want to explain why we were actually right, or at least significantly less wrong than is being implied. We want to point out the flaws in the reasoning of the person correcting us. We want to shift the relevant share of the blame to other factors. We want, with great consistency and creativity, to protect our image of ourselves as competent, trustworthy, and generally getting things right. Sometimes those responses are legitimate. Not all correction is accurate, and not all correction is delivered with care or good intent. Proverbs acknowledges this, but the consistent pattern of rejecting correction, of always having an explanation, of never being able to simply and genuinely say, "You're right, I was wrong, and I'm grateful you told me." That pattern is a reliable marker of foolishness rather than wisdom. The wise person can receive correction without their sense of identity threatening to collapse, because their identity is not built on the fragile foundation of always being right. It is built on the more durable foundation of genuinely wanting to grow. Every piece of accurate correction is a specific, actionable gift, data about the real gap between who you currently are and who you have the potential to become. The wise person receives it as exactly that. Lesson 34. The fear of man is a trap that catches intelligent people. Fear of man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe. Proverbs 29:25. The fear of man, the deep, controlling desire for human approval, the pattern of shaping your decisions primarily around the anticipated reactions of the people whose opinions most matter to you. The experience of being functionally governed by what people will think, rather than by what is actually true and right, is one of the most pervasive, most powerful, and least openly discussed traps that intelligent, otherwise capable people spend their entire lives struggling against, and Proverbs gives it exactly the name it deserves: a snare. The imagery of a snare is precise and deliberate. A snare is not a dramatic, visible trap that you can see from a distance and choose to avoid. It is hidden in the ground, concealed under the surface of what looks like ordinary terrain, and when you step into it, the initial sensation is not one of dramatic catastrophe. It is simply the gradual, bewildering discovery that you cannot move in the direction you intended. You find yourself unable to say the honest thing because you are thinking about the reaction. Unable to make the right decision because you are calculating the cost in approval. Unable to take the bold step you know is right because you are paralyzed by the image of the disapproval that will follow. The alternative Proverbs offers is not indifference to people. Wisdom is deeply, consistently concerned with how we affect the people around us, and careless indifference to others is never what is being commended. The alternative is trusting in the Lord rather than in human approval as the ultimate reference point for your life. When God's assessment of you is genuinely the one that matters most, not as a thing you believe theologically, but as a reality you live from daily, you become remarkably, almost surprisingly free. Free to speak truth when it will be unwelcome. Free to make decisions that will cost you approval in the short term because they are right in the long term. Free to love people genuinely without needing them to love you back on your specific terms. Lesson 35. The rewards of genuine humility are extraordinary. Humility is the fear of the Lord. Its wages are riches and honor and life. Proverbs 22:4. This verse draws a direct and explicit connection between humility and the fear of the Lord, establishing that these are not merely two virtues that happen to be related. They are expressions of the same fundamental orientation toward God and toward reality. The person who genuinely, deeply fears God, who has been properly arrested by the reality of who God is and who they are by comparison, will be humble. Not as a cultivated performance of lowliness, but as the natural, organic result of having seen things clearly. When you have genuinely stood before the reality of God, The particular poses and pretensions of pride simply do not survive the encounter. And then the wage, riches and honor and life. Not in a simplistic transactional sense, as though humility were a technique for getting God to give you good things, but as the consistent, observable fruit of a life ordered around the values and the character of the God who made it. Riches, not necessarily in the narrow financial sense, though Proverbs consistently associates wise and humble living with practical flourishing, but in the richer sense of a life abundant with genuine relationship, meaningful work, clear conscience, and the deep satisfaction of growing into who you were made to be. Honor, not seized or manufactured, but received as the natural fruit of a life that has been consistently lived with integrity and care for others. And life, not mere existence, but the vibrant, purposeful, deeply connected experience of actually being alive to God, to the people around you, and to the work you have been specifically given to do in the world. Humility is not the path of the loser. It has never been. It is the path of the genuinely wise, and its rewards are as real as they are undervalued by a culture that does not know how to see them. Lesson 36. Keep learning for as long as you live. Listen to advice and accept discipline, and at the end you will be counted among the wise. De Proverbs 19:20. There is a particular kind of person that Proverbs has no patience for, and the portrait is uncomfortably recognizable. The person who is firmly, comfortably convinced that their existing understanding of things is essentially sufficient, that their intuitions are reliably more accurate than other people's reasoned observations, and that they have largely arrived at the level of wisdom they need and can therefore stop the effortful work of learning. The person who has stopped being genuinely curious. The person who has stopped asking questions they do not already know the answer to. The person who, when they encounter a perspective that challenges their existing framework, experiences it primarily as a threat rather than as an opportunity. The person who will be counted among the wise, Proverbs says, is the one who listens to advice, not selectively, not only when the advice confirms what they already believe, but as a consistent and genuinely open practice of seeking and receiving input from those who know more, see more clearly, or have relevant experience they lack. And who accepts discipline, who does not resist the shaping process, who allows the friction of honest correction and the pressure of genuine consequence to do their forming work, rather than expending enormous energy trying to escape or explain away those experiences. The phrase, "at the end," is significant and worth sitting with. This is not wisdom that comes quickly or easily or through any shortcut. It is wisdom that accumulates across an entire lifetime of faithful, humble, consistent listening and accepting. The person who begins this practice genuinely and maintains it with patience and perseverance will arrive at old age with a depth and quality of understanding that is genuinely rare and genuinely beautiful to be near. The person who resists the practice will arrive old, perhaps, but not wise. Begin now. The earlier, the better, but it is never too late to begin. Lesson 37. Righteousness builds nations and communities that endure. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a disgrace to any people. Proverbs 14:34. Proverbs is not only interested in individual character, vital as that is throughout its pages. It has a vision, clear, consistent, and deeply serious, for what healthy, genuinely flourishing human communities and societies look like. And at the center of that vision is righteousness, not merely personal morality expressed in the privacy of one's own life, but the quality of justice, honesty, moral seriousness, and genuine care for human dignity that characterizes the public, civic, institutional life of a community. Communities and nations characterized by integrity in their institutions, genuine justice for the vulnerable, honest dealing in commerce and public life, and serious care for their most marginalized members, these communities genuinely flourish. Not because righteousness operates as a magic formula that overrides all other factors, but because these qualities produce the kind of social trust, institutional reliability, and shared commitment to human dignity that make communal life genuinely work at every level, from the smallest neighborhoods to the largest nations. The opposite trajectory is equally observable and equally documented. Communities and institutions where dishonesty has become normalized, where the powerful exploit the weak with effective impunity, where justice is reliably available only to those with money and connections, where integrity is publicly mocked as naivete and cynicism is celebrated as sophistication. These communities do not maintain their health. Their social fabric deteriorates. Not suddenly, not always dramatically, but with a consistency that Proverbs has been noting across millennia. This is a call for every person, in whatever sphere of influence they occupy, however large or small, to carry the values of wisdom and righteousness into their public and civic life with the same seriousness they bring to their private one. Lesson 38. The story you tell yourself shapes the life you live. For as he thinks in his heart, so is he. The Proverbs 23:7, NKJV. The internal narrative that runs almost continuously in the background of your conscious experience. The story you tell yourself about who you are, what you are capable of, what you deserve, what God thinks of you, what is possible for your particular life, is not a passive description of a reality that already exists independently of the telling. It is an active, constant, powerful, shaping force. As a person thinks in their heart, so they are. The inner story does not merely reflect your life, it actively creates it. This is why genuine transformation in the biblical framework always begins with the renewal of the mind. Not with a change of behavior that is imposed from the outside while the inner narrative remains unchanged, that produces compliance at best and brittleness under pressure. It begins with the patient, difficult, grace-enabled renovation of the framework through which you see yourself, the world, God, and the relationship between all three. When that changes, behavior follows. Not as a performance, but as a natural expression of who you have genuinely become. If you carry an internal narrative that tells you that you are fundamentally unlovable or inherently incapable or permanently defined by your worst failures, your behavior will, with remarkable consistency, find ways to confirm that narrative. If you carry the narrative that wisdom is available to you, that God is genuinely for you, that growth is genuinely possible for a person with your history and your limitations, you will begin to live from that reality, and the reality of your life will begin to shift accordingly. What story are you actually telling yourself in your most honest and unguarded inner moments? Is it true? Is it aligned with what God says about you in His Word? Because you are living it out, one day at a time, regardless of whether you have examined it. Lesson 39. Do not make commitments you cannot keep. My son, if you have put up security for your neighbor, if you have shaken hands in pledge for a stranger, you have been trapped by what you said. Proverbs 6:1-2. This may appear at first glance to be a narrowly financial and culturally specific piece of instruction, a warning about the ancient practice of pledging security for another person's debt. And in its immediate application, it is certainly that. But the broader wisdom principle it expresses is one with implications that extend into every area of life. Do not make commitments you cannot actually keep. and do not entangle your well-being in obligations that belong ultimately to someone else. In the ancient Near Eastern context, pledging security for another person's debt was potentially catastrophic in consequences. If they defaulted, you were fully liable for everything they owed. Proverbs warns against the impulsive moment of generosity-flavored commitment that locks you into a situation you did not fully think through, not out of callousness toward others' genuine needs, but out of honest, clear-eyed prudence about the real limits of your resources and your responsibility. The broader principle is about wise boundaries and genuine self-knowledge. You are not called to rescue everyone from every difficulty. You cannot guarantee outcomes that are not within your actual control to guarantee. And the wisdom here is fundamentally about knowing the difference, a distinction Proverbs draws with care throughout, between genuine, thoughtful, sustainable generosity and impulsive overcommitment that places your household, your resources, and your capacity for future generosity at serious and unnecessary risk, while ultimately serving the other person poorly. Care for others with genuine generosity, but do so with eyes fully open, with an honest understanding of what is yours to give and what is not, and with the long-term view that keeps your capacity to keep giving intact. Lesson 40. The woman of noble character is worth far more than rubies. A wife of noble character who can find, she is worth far more than rubies. Proverbs 31:10. Proverbs 31 is one of the most frequently misappropriated passages in all of Scripture, used too often as a crushing checklist of impossible expectations for women rather than being read for what it actually is, an extraordinary celebration, a song of genuine, heartfelt, detailed praise for a woman of remarkable character, competence, wisdom, and dignity. And it is not accidental that a book which began with wisdom, personified as a woman, ends with this specific portrait. The bookend is deeply intentional. The woman described in Proverbs 31 is not a one-dimensional domestic figure. She is entrepreneurial. She considers fields and buys them. She plants vineyards. She makes and sells fine goods. She is physically capable and hard-working. Her arms are strong for her tasks. She is generous to the poor, extending her hand to those in need. She speaks with wisdom and faithful instruction. She provides for her household with extraordinary creativity and diligence. She is trusted completely and without reservation by her husband. She is respected and honored in her community. She is a fully drawn portrait of comprehensive, flourishing human character, spiritual depth, practical competence, relational wisdom, and genuine care for others, all integrated into a single life. The point is never to produce an exhausting checklist that no human being can fulfill in every dimension simultaneously. The point is to honor and celebrate the kind of person, in this case a woman, whose life is oriented toward wisdom, toward generosity, toward the fear of God, and toward the genuine good of the people around her. And that kind of person, regardless of the specific form their gifts take, regardless of gender, is, as Proverbs says without hesitation, worth far more than rubies. Lesson 41. Even fools seem wise when they hold their tongue. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues. Proverbs 17:28. This proverb carries a dry, almost wry edge to it, but its practical wisdom is razor sharp. There is a consistent and observable relationship between the volume of a person's speech and the average quality of what that speech contains. The person who speaks constantly, who fills every available silence with their voice, who offers an opinion on every subject regardless of the depth of their actual knowledge, who cannot resist the compulsion to add their perspective to every conversation, will inevitably and regularly say things that are foolish, inaccurate, or unhelpful. And if the pattern persists, it becomes the defining impression. The person who speaks less, who listens with genuine attention before responding, who processes their thoughts before releasing them, who is willing to sit in silence rather than filling it, who can be in a conversation without feeling compelled to dominate it, will say fewer things in total, but will tend to say them with considerably more weight and precision. And in the absence of the excessive and indiscriminate speech that would have revealed foolishness, even what might have been questionable simply goes unobserved. But the deeper and more important wisdom here is not about managing perception, important as that may be. It is about the spiritual and character discipline of restraint, learning to be genuinely comfortable in silence, learning to listen to someone all the way to the end of their thought before you begin formulating your response. Learning to sit with a question long enough to understand it before attempting an answer. Learning to resist, day after day, the impulse to add your voice to a conversation when adding your voice would serve primarily your desire to be heard rather than the actual needs of the conversation. These are wisdom practices of the first order, and they are profoundly countercultural in a world that rewards loudness, output volume, and the constant broadcasting of opinions over depth, precision, and the disciplined restraint of knowing when to be quiet. Lesson 42. Do not boast about tomorrow. Because you do not own it, do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring. Proverbs 27. 1. This proverb functions as a quiet, steady corrective to one of the most common and most deeply embedded forms of human presumption. The confident, largely unconscious assumption that tomorrow will be recognizably similar to today, that our plans will proceed roughly as we have designed them, that the health we currently have will persist, that the resources available to us now will continue to be available, that the people we love will still be here, that the circumstances we have built our plans around will cooperate with those plans. We plan as though we own tomorrow, when in fact we have never owned so much as a single hour of it. We plan, and we absolutely should plan. Planning is a wisdom practice, and Proverbs commends it throughout. But there is a version of planning that tips quietly into a form of presumption, the confident public declaration of exactly what tomorrow will bring. The assumption without examination that our current trajectory will continue uninterrupted. The dismissal of the reality that everything can change for any person in a single moment that no one anticipated. Do not boast about tomorrow. Hold your plans with genuine humility. Make them with full commitment and diligent effort, but hold them with open hands rather than white-knuckled grip. Because the God who holds tomorrow is not bound by the agenda you have constructed for it, and his interruptions of our well-ordered plans have, more often than we might comfortably acknowledge, turned out to be the most significant and most transforming events of our lives. This posture also generates something practically valuable, a deeper, more intentional quality of presence in today. If tomorrow is genuinely not guaranteed, then today is extraordinarily precious. Live it accordingly. Lesson 43. Remove the gossip and the fire dies. Without wood a fire goes out. Without a gossip a quarrel dies down. Proverbs 26:20. Gossip is one of the most consistently, repeatedly, and emphatically condemned behaviors in the entire book of Proverbs. And this specific verse captures the reason with a precision that has the quality of a scientific observation. A quarrel, once its initial heat has been generated by some real or perceived offense, does not sustain itself indefinitely on its own. It requires fuel to keep burning. It requires fresh information, new grievances, additional perspectives on the other party's faults and failures, ongoing material for the aggrieved party to work with. And gossip is precisely that fuel. The person who carries the story from one person to the next, who adds texture and context and their own editorial framing as they pass it along, who ensures that the details of someone's failure or someone's private difficulty or someone's most unflattering moment are widely distributed. That person is the wood that keeps destructive fires burning when they would otherwise simply go out. The inverse observation is equally instructive and in many ways more immediately actionable. Without gossip, quarrels die down. The person who refuses to carry stories about other people's business, who will not add their own voice to the chorus of criticism, who declines to participate in conversations whose primary purpose is the deepening of someone's reputational injury, who quietly but firmly changes the subject or leaves the conversation when it moves in that direction. That person is, functionally, a fire extinguisher. Their refusal to provide fuel breaks the chain that would otherwise keep the conflict burning. This is a genuinely high standard, and it is worth being honest about why it is difficult. Gossip is among the most socially rewarded behaviors in human communities because it creates a specific kind of intimacy, the intimacy of shared knowledge about someone who is not present to represent themselves. It generates social interest and the dopamine reward of belonging to an in-group that knows something others do not. And yet Proverbs consistently, without apology, identifies it as one of the primary engines of relational and communal destruction. Refuse to be wood. Choose instead to be water. Lesson 44. The path of the righteous grows brighter with every step. The path of the righteous is like the morning sun, shining ever brighter till the full light of day. Proverbs 4:18. This is, without question, one of the most beautiful and most genuinely hopeful images in the entire Book of Proverbs. And it deserves to be received slowly and fully. The life of a person who walks faithfully and persistently with God, who chooses wisdom with consistency across ordinary time, who refuses to give up on the journey, even in its most discouraging seasons, that life is compared to a sunrise. It begins in the pre-dawn darkness, in uncertainty and dimness, in the kind of not quite seeing that characterizes the early stages of any genuine journey of faith. And it grows brighter, and then brighter still, until the full, generous, unobstructed light of day. This is an image of progressive growth, of cumulative wisdom, of a life that does not peak somewhere in the middle and then slowly decline, but that keeps getting richer, deeper, more luminous with every year of faithful, patient walking with God. It is the direct opposite of the fool's path described elsewhere in Proverbs, the path that looks attractive early on and that grows progressively darker as its real direction becomes clear. If you are young and just beginning the journey, this verse is an invitation to begin now, in whatever pre-dawn dimness you are currently in, trusting that the light will come. If you are in the middle of a genuinely difficult season, one where the path feels uncertain and the light seems far off and the progress invisible, this verse is a reminder that faithfulness, compounding over time, produces increasing light, even when the compounding is not yet visible to you. If you are further along the journey and can look back across decades of walking with God, you almost certainly know what this verse is describing from the inside. The light has been growing the entire time, even when you could not see it happening. Do not stop walking. The path keeps getting brighter. Lesson 45. Give careful and consistent thought to where your feet are going. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet and be steadfast in all your ways. Proverbs 4:26. The instruction in this verse is an invitation to something that is increasingly countercultural and increasingly rare: genuinely intentional living. The alternative to intentional living is not neutrality. It is the default life, the life that happens to you while you are busy not choosing it, the life shaped by inertia and convenience and the accumulated drift of habits you never examined. The life whose direction was determined not by your deliberate choices, but by the slow, unnoticed weight of all the things you simply went along with. Giving careful thought to your paths means asking with honest regularity the questions that intentional living requires. Where am I actually going right now? Is this the direction I have chosen with thought and prayer, or is it the direction I have simply drifted into because it was the path of least resistance? Do my daily habits, my closest relationships, my financial decisions, my use of time and energy and attention, do they, taken together, point toward the kind of life I genuinely want to build? Are they pointing toward God? This is not an anxious, obsessive, daily second-guessing of every small decision. That kind of hyper-vigilance is its own form of foolishness. It is the periodic, honest, courageous taking of stock that the well-lived life consistently requires. Look at where your feet are. Look with clear eyes at where the current direction is taking you, and if the path is wrong, or less right than it could be, adjust. The capacity to course correct without excessive drama or self-recrimination is one of the most practically useful features of the wise life. And then, be steadfast. Once the path has been chosen with genuine care and honest prayer, walk it with commitment. Do not allow every shifting wind of cultural opinion or momentary circumstance to knock you off a course you chose for good reasons. Steadfastness on a wise path is not stubbornness, it is faithfulness. Lesson 46. The ant has something profound to teach you about preparation. Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways, and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. Proverbs 6:68. The instruction to go to the ant and learn from it carries an intentional and productive irony. One of the most sophisticated pieces of wisdom in one of the most important books ever written is illustrated by one of the smallest and most humble creatures on earth. And the lesson the ant teaches is precisely the kind of wisdom that does not depend on intelligence, education, or access to sophisticated information. It depends on the willingness to look at reality honestly and act on what you see. The ant does not require external motivation to do what needs to be done. It has no commander giving it instructions, no overseer monitoring its output, no external accountability structure keeping it honest. It reads the season with instinctive clarity. Summer is here, harvest is available, winter is coming. And it works now, during the season of abundance, to prepare for the season of scarcity that experience and wisdom both confirm will follow. It does not wait until winter has arrived to begin wishing it had prepared. It acts while the opportunity to prepare still exists. This is a lesson about the stewardship of seasons that applies with force in every area of life. There are seasons of relative abundance available in every life, seasons of good health, of open opportunity, of energy and capacity, of resources available to be invested. The wise person does not simply enjoy these seasons passively and assume they will continue indefinitely. They recognize them clearly for what they are, windows of opportunity that will not stay open forever. And they work with diligence during the abundance to prepare for the scarcity that is always, eventually, coming. Go to the ant. Be self-motivated. Read the season you are in with honest clarity. Prepare while you can. It is one of the most important things a wise person does. Lesson 47. The name of the Lord is a fortress that cannot be breached. The name of the Lord is a fortified tower. The righteous run to it and are safe. Proverbs 18:10. In the ancient world, a fortified tower was the place you ran when the outer defenses had been breached, when every other form of protection had either failed or been overwhelmed. It was built specifically and expensively, and with great attention to its structural integrity, designed to withstand assault from even the most determined and well-resourced enemy. When everything else had been compromised or destroyed, the tower was the last refuge. The place where those who ran to it fast enough would be safe. Proverbs says the name of the Lord is that tower, not your financial security, however substantial, not your social network, however influential, not your own strength, intelligence, competence, or reputation, however genuinely formidable. All of these are real and valuable, and Proverbs commends developing them throughout its pages. But they are not towers. They will all, under sufficient pressure, fail. They will all encounter conditions they were not designed to withstand. They all have a breaking point. The name of the Lord, His revealed character, His covenant faithfulness, His demonstrated commitment to those who are His power that is not limited by any circumstance or opposed by any force in the universe. That is what cannot be breached, and the righteous run to it. Note the verb with care. Not walk, not eventually make their reluctant way there as an absolute last resort after everything else has demonstrably failed. Run. The person who has learned, through the actual lived experience of knowing God across the seasons of their life, what He is, who He has proven Himself to be in the darkest and most testing moments, runs to Him when the storm comes. Not because no other option exists, but because they have learned through irreplaceable personal experience that He is simply better than every other option. Run to Him. He is the tower. Lesson 48. The person who refreshes others will be refreshed. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. The Proverbs 11:25. Proverbs returns to the theme of generosity with a consistency that eventually makes the case more through cumulative weight than through any single argument. Generosity is not merely a moral obligation or a spiritual discipline to be endured. It is a pathway to genuine, sustainable flourishing. The generous person prospers. The person who refreshes others will be refreshed. The pattern is stated as a reliable observation about how the world, under God's governance, consistently tends to work. This is not a transaction formula in which you give precisely calculated amounts in order to receive precisely calculated returns. That is not generosity. That is investment strategy dressed in spiritual language. What Proverbs is describing is something more organic and less predictable than that. The consistent, general, observable tendency of generous living to produce flourishing in the giver as well as the receiver. Not in a way that can be perfectly timed or precisely quantified, but in a way that the long view of a generous life consistently confirms. Part of this is practical and relational in a way that is straightforward enough to observe. Generous people build genuine, deep, real relationships with other generous people. They create communities of mutual care and support. They tend to be the kind of people that others want to help when they are in need, because the others have experienced their generosity firsthand. But the deeper reality is spiritual and harder to quantify. There is something about living with genuinely open hands, about refusing the anxious, self-protective grip of the scarcity mindset, that positions a person to receive in ways that the closed, hoarding posture simply does not. Be a refresher. Look consistently and actively for opportunities to give energy, encouragement, resources, and genuine care to people whose reserves are running low. And trust the principle, one of the most repeated and most verified in the entire Book of Proverbs, that as you refresh others, you will be refreshed. Lesson 49. The harvest of righteousness is worth every moment of the training. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Hebrews 12:11. Throughout its pages, Proverbs is deeply, consistently, and unapologetically committed to the value of discipline, in the formation of children, in the development of personal character, in the cultivation of any virtue or skill worth having. And one of the most honest and important things Proverbs does throughout this consistent emphasis is refuse to make discipline sound attractive in the moment. It does not try to sell you a version of growth that is painless and comfortable. The training is real. The discomfort is real. The friction of genuine discipline, whether it comes through external correction, natural consequence, or the sustained, demanding work of forming new habits in place of deeply entrenched old ones, is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is the process itself. But so is the harvest. And the harvest, righteousness and peace, is worth every moment of every uncomfortable part of every difficult season of training. Righteousness, the quality of being genuinely, deeply aligned with God and with others, of having developed a character that consistently, reliably, almost instinctively produces good fruit, even in difficult circumstances. Peace, not the absence of difficulty or the elimination of all external pressure, but the deep, settled, unkillable sense of being genuinely well, of being in right relationship with God, with yourself, and with the people around you. This harvest does not come to the person who successfully avoids all discipline. It does not come to the person who insists that growth should never involve discomfort, who escapes every consequence before it can do its forming work, who takes every shortcut available because the longer route seems unnecessary. It comes with a consistency that Proverbs finds worth emphasizing repeatedly to those who have been genuinely, patiently trained by discipline. Endure the training. Trust the process. The harvest is real, and it is coming. Lesson 50. The wise person finishes what they start. Finishing is better than starting. Patience is better than pride. Ecclesiastes 7:8. One of the most prevalent and practically consequential forms of foolishness is the inability to finish things. And it is so widespread and so normalized that we have largely stopped recognizing it as foolishness. The world is extraordinarily well supplied with gifted, enthusiastic, genuinely talented starters. People who begin projects, commitments, relationships, spiritual disciplines, and significant life undertakings with genuine excitement, genuine intention, and real early momentum, and who never cross the finish line. Who move on when the initial novelty dissolves and the real, hard, unglamorous work of the middle section is what remains. Who pursue the next beginning because beginnings always feel alive and full of possibility in a way that middles rarely do. Finishing is better than starting. This is not a statement about the unimportance of beginnings. Every good completion began with a good beginning. It is a statement about where the actual value of a thing is created. The book you read halfway does not change how you think. The discipline you practiced enthusiastically for 3 weeks before abandoning it does not form the character it was designed to build. The relationship you invested in generously when it was new and gratifying, but withdrew from when it required the harder work of sustained commitment, does not produce the depth of bond that years of faithful presence creates. Value is created at the finish line, and the finish line is reached through the long, patient, unspectacular middle, which is precisely where most people lose interest and move on. Patience is better than pride. The person who starts with great fanfare and never finishes is, at root, driven by pride, the desire for the admiration and the sense of momentum that beginnings reliably generate. Without the humility to accept and persist through the long middle section that no one particularly admires and that generates no particular recognition. Patient perseverance, the kind that shows up on Wednesday morning of the 3rd year without requiring any particular emotional motivation to do so, is the specific virtue that converts beginnings into completions and good intentions into actual, real-world, lasting fruit. Lesson 51. Wisdom calls out in the open to everyone who will hear. Out in the open, wisdom calls aloud, she raises her voice in the public square. Proverbs 1:20. We tend, in our cultural moment, to imagine wisdom as something rare and difficult to access, hidden in the libraries of the highly educated, available only to those with the right credentials, the right connections, the right intellectual formation, or the right experiences. Proverbs dismantles this picture with a single, memorable image: wisdom standing in the public square, not whispering discreetly to a curated few, but raising her voice and calling aloud to everyone who passes. Wisdom is not hidden. She is not locked away. She is not available only to a particular class, or a particular intellectual tradition, or a particular level of education, or a particular phase of spiritual development. She is present, visible, and actively inviting. She is calling. Her invitation is genuine, it is universal, and it is repeated daily in every context and circumstance that human life encompasses. The question, the only question that actually matters in this equation, is not whether wisdom is available to you. It is. It always has been. The question is whether you are in the public square, whether your ears and your heart are genuinely open, whether you are paying attention to what is being offered to you in Scripture, in the counsel of wise people, in the hard lessons that experience keeps trying to teach. In the still, small voice that speaks in the quiet moments, you are increasingly reluctant to create for yourself. Wisdom calls. She has never stopped calling. The only remaining variable is whether you are listening. Lesson 52. The fear of the Lord is the whole of it. Return here always. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. Ecclesiastes 12:13. We began this entire journey with the fear of the Lord. And now, at the end of 52 lessons, having walked through everything Proverbs has to say about speech and money, about relationships and character, about parenting and leadership, about anger and generosity, about discipline and hope, about integrity and community and justice, and the long, patient work of becoming wise, we return to exactly where we started. And this return is not a failure of imagination or a lack of material. It is architectural. It is the design of the Book of Proverbs itself. All of it rests on this foundation, and if followed faithfully to its end, returns to it. Fear God and keep his commandments. This is the conclusion of the matter. Not a partial conclusion, not the most important conclusion among several, the conclusion, the whole of it. It is worth lingering here on what this actually means, because it is easy for a phrase this familiar to pass through the mind without disturbing anything. To fear God is not to be terrorized by a capricious deity waiting to catch you in an error. It is to have been genuinely, deeply arrested by the reality of who he is, his holiness, his goodness, his wisdom that encompasses everything, his love that chose you not because of what you deserve, but because of who he is. It is to have that reality function as the genuine lived-from center of your life, rather than as a theological position you hold in theory while living by other values in practice. And to keep his commandments is not the grim, joyless performance of religious compliance for the purpose of avoiding punishment. The commandments of God, scattered throughout the wisdom literature of Scripture and crystallized in the teachings of Jesus, are not a cage. They are a map. They are the accumulated wisdom of the God who made human beings and knows exactly what human flourishing actually requires. To keep them is not to be diminished. It is to align yourself with the grain of the universe as its maker designed it. It is to discover in practice and over time that what God calls good is genuinely, richly, Abundantly good. Better than the alternatives. Better for you and for everyone your life touches. 52 lessons, 1 year, 1 path. One foundational truth that everything else is built upon and returns to. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and it is the whole of wisdom, and there is nothing more important to know. Proverbs has laid the path with extraordinary generosity and clarity. The invitation, standing in the open square, calling aloud to everyone who passes, is exactly what it has always been. Unmistakable, unhidden, freely offered, and available to anyone who will genuinely receive it. Wisdom is calling. She is calling you, specifically, right now, in the particular circumstances of your actual life. Will you answer? Thank you for spending this time here. Truly, the fact that you have stayed through all 52 lessons tells me something important about you. It tells me you are serious about this, serious about wisdom, serious about growth, serious about building a life that holds up under pressure and means something that lasts. And I am genuinely honored to be part of that journey with you. If this video spoke to something real in you today, if even one of these 52 lessons landed in a place where you needed it, I want to ask you something from the heart. Please subscribe to this channel, not just as a reflex click, but as a genuine, intentional commitment to keep showing up for this, to keep learning, to keep returning to the wisdom that God has placed within reach for every one of us, no matter where we are starting from and no matter what season we are currently in. This community, the people who gather here from across the world, who share this same hunger for something real and lasting and genuinely transforming, is something I do not take for granted for a single day. I would be deeply glad to have you be a permanent part of it. If you want to go deeper still, please consider becoming a channel member. Members get early access to videos before they are released to the public, and they step into a closer, more connected circle of the community. If that sounds like something that would enrich your journey, I would love to have you there. Hit subscribe right now if you have not already. Turn on notifications. There is genuinely significant content coming, and I do not want you to miss it. More deep dives into the wisdom of Scripture. More lessons that will challenge you, encourage you, and equip you to build the kind of life that does not crumble when the pressure comes. If this video helped you, please share it. With a friend who is in a hard season, with a family member who is searching for direction, with someone who is hungry for something real and does not yet know where to find it. You might be the specific reason they find it today. That matters more than you know. And please give this video a like. It is a small thing that makes a significant difference in helping more people who need this find their way to it. I will leave you with this blessing. May the God who inspired every word of Proverbs grant you the wisdom to navigate whatever uncertainty lies ahead of you with grace and clarity and unshakable confidence. May He give you the courage to speak truth when it costs you something, the humility to receive correction when you need it, the patience to endure the training that produces the harvest, the generosity to hold everything you have with open hands, and the settled, unwavering, joy-producing peace that comes from knowing, in the deepest place, that the fear of the Lord is the beginning and the sustaining, and in the end, the whole of wisdom. Go well. Be wise. And I will see you in the next